Baron Trump's Chapter 19, Marvelous Underground Journey, and I'm just going to read it for you now. Begins with something about little pseudopsies, but branches off on another subject, to wit, the silent song of singing fingers, the fair maid of the city of silver. Beryl Brow is kind enough to enlighten me on a certain point, and he takes occasion to pay Bulker a very high compliment, which of course he deserved. The longer I stayed among the Pseudopsies, the more did I become convinced that they were the happiest, the lightest-hearted, and most contented human beings that I had ever met in all my travels. If it were possible for the links of a long chain suspended over a chasm to be living, thinking beings for a short while, it seems to me they would hang together in the most perfect accord, for each link would discover that he was no better than his neighbor, and that the welfare of all the other links depended upon him and upon theirs. So it was with the form of folk. Having no sense of sight, they knew no such thing as envy, and all hands were alike when they reached out for a greeting. I was amazed at times to see how they could feel my approach, when I would be 10 or 15 feet away from them, and I often amused myself by trying to steal by one of them in the street. But no, it was impossible. A hand would invariably be held out for a greeting. Little by little, they got over their distrust of me, and made up their minds that I had told them the truth when I had said that no dancing spectre was forever following at my heels. One of the most interesting sights was to see a group of Pseudopsy children at play, building houses with silver blocks, or playing a game very much like our dominoes. By the way, the link to this is below. You can get it on archive. There's 2 copies loaded up there, archive.org. I noticed that they kept no tally. Such wonderful memories had they, that it was quite unnecessary. At first the children were so frightened upon feeling of me that they fled with terror pictured upon their little faces. Their parents explained to me that I had made very much the same impression upon them, as if I should feel of a person whose skin was as rough as a sea urchin's. When at last I succeeded in coaxing several of them to my side, I was astounded to see one little fellow who had by chance pressed his tiny hand against my watch pocket spring away from me, terror-stricken. He had felt a tick and didn't stop running until he had reached his mother's side. His wonderful tail that the little baron carried some strange animal around me, and it was some time before I could persuade even the parents that the watch was not alive, and that it was not the little animal's heart which they felt beating. On one occasion, when a little Sudopsy was sitting on my lap with its tiny arm twined affectionately around my neck, I happened to make some remark to Bulger, when to my amazement the child sprang out of my arms and darted away with a look of terror upon his little face. What I had done to him, why it seems that by the merest chance his tiny hand had been pressed against my throat, and that he had been terrified by feeling the strange vibrations caused by my voice. Immediately the report spread about that the little baron carried another little baron around in his throat, and that anyone could feel him if I would only consent. It took me a long while to convince them that what they felt was not another little baron, but merely a vibration caused by my expelling my breath in a way peculiar to the people of the upper world. But all the same, I was obliged to say many hundreds of useless things to Bulger in order to give their little hands a chance to feel something wonderful. From the little I have told you about the names of the Formifolk, dear friends, you have no doubt understood that their names took their rise from some physical quality, defect, or peculiarity. Besides the names I have already mentioned, I remember sharp chin, long nose, silk ears, smooth palms, big knuckle, nail off, hammer fist, soft touch, hole in cheek or hole in chin, dimple, crooked hair, cowlick, and so on and so on. But to my amazement one day, when asking the name of any young girl whose long and delicate fingers had attracted my attention, I was informed that her name was Singing Fingers, or possibly I might translate it, Music Fingers. I had noticed that Sudopsies had some idea of music, for the children often amuse themselves dancing, and while so engaged beat time with their fingertips on each other's cheeks or foreheads. But I was completely in the dark as to what they meant by singing fingers, or why the young girl should have been so named. Hence was I greatly pleased to hear the maiden's mother ask me whether I would like to feel one of my daughter's songs, as she termed it. Upon my acquiescing, the mother approached me and proceeded to roll up the sleeves of my coat until she had laid my arms bare to the elbow, and then she took my arms and clasped them across my breast, one above the other. Bulger watched the proceeding with somewhat of displeasure in his eyes. He had half an idea that these silent people might play some hurtful trick upon his little master, but my smile soon disarmed his suspicion. Singing Fingers now drew near, and as her sweet face, with its sightless eyes turned full upon me, I could hardly keep back the tears. And yet, why grieve for anyone who seemed to be so perfectly happy? Wait a minute. Hang on a second. Why isn't this page turning? Wait a minute. Guys, there's something wrong with the page. Oh, I see. I'm hitting the wrong thing here. Oops. Sorry about that. Wait a minute, now we're at, okay, so this is where we are. Apologies. Okay, and her bosom rose and fell quickly, sending forth a faint breathing sound. She looked so like a radiant child of some other world that before I thought I cried out, "Speak! Oh, speak, beautiful child!" In an instant she drew back, affrighted, from the sudden vibration of the air had startled her, but I reached out and touched her hand to give her to understand that she need fear nothing. And then she drew near me again. Suddenly, her beautiful hands, with their long, frail, delicate fingers, were lifted into the air, and she began to sway her body and to wave her hands in gentle and graceful motions, as if keeping time with some music. Gradually she drew nearer to me, and ever and anon her silken fingertips touched my hands or arms, as if they were a keyboard, and she was about to begin to execute a soft and dainty bit of music, and I noticed that her fingers had some delightful perfume on them. Now fast and faster the gentle taps rain upon me. With rhythmic regularity, they soothe me, they thrill me, they reach my heart as if they were the sweet notes of a flute or the soft tones of a singer's voice. The maiden is really singing to me. It seems to me that I can understand what she is saying, or rather thinking, as her dainty fingertips fairly fly hither and thither, and I can hear her low breathing grow louder and louder. Suddenly she leaves my hands and arms, and I feel her gentle tapping on my cheeks and brow. So gently, oh, so gently and soothingly, her fingers touch me, that at last they feel like rose leaves dragged across my face. The sensation is so delightful, so like the soft touch of sleep to weary eyes, that I drop off in a good earnest, and when, after a moment or so, I open my eyes, there sat the smiling Formifolk, waiting for me to awake, and there stood the radiant-visaged singing fingers in front of me, childlike, waiting to be commended. And so you see, dear friends, that it is not so hard to be happy after all, if you only set about it in the right way. The former folks seem to have set about it the right way, judging by results. They are only the things we have to judge by. Okay, page 127. Some men will fish all day and not have a bite, and some people will try their whole lives to catch happiness and not get any more than a nibble. They don't use the right kind of bait. Let 'em try a kind act, a live one. There was something I wanted to ask of the learned brow, so the next call I made on him, I put this question to him: "Is it possible, learned master, that thy people have absolutely no guide, no overseer, no rulers?" The great scholar of the former folk ceased reading the 4 books, which lay open before him, one under each hand and one under each foot, as I handed him my silver tablet. "Little Baron," was his reply, "if there were only a bramble bush big enough for all you people of the upper world to jump into, and if you could only get rid of your ears too, you would soon be rid of your rulers who oppress you, who prey upon you, for no one would have any desire to be a ruler if there was no one left to look at him, and if he couldn't hear what the flatterers said about him. Vanity is the soil that rulers spring from, as the mushrooms spring from the rich loam of our dark caverns. They pretend that it is the exercise of power that they are so fond of. Believe them not. It is the gratification of their vanity and nothing else. If it were only in thy power to say to every man who itched to be a ruler, well and good brother, a ruler thou shalt be, but bear in mind, weak man, and what thou hast donned, thy gaudy uniform, and mounted thy gaily caparisoned steed, when thou ridest at the head of troop, cavalcade with 10,000 armed men, following thee on foot as slaves their master, and the plaudits of the foolish multitude rend the air. No eye shall witness the splendor of thy triumph, no ear catch a sound of the deafening cheers. Take my word for it, little baron, no one would want to be a ruler any more. Where there are no rulers, little baron continued, hang on, okay, learned barrel brow, there can be no followers. Where there are no followers, there will be no quarreling. When it comes necessary in our nation, we form the great circle for deliberation. Each man writes out what he thinks on his tablet. This is like incredible. This was written in the 1800s by an attorney. And he's talking about a tablet. I guess they used to call they had chalk tablets like an iPad, but anyway, let me just continue. Then their opinions are read and counted, and the majority rules. Popular vote, right? So they got a tablet, the popular vote wins. But we form the great circle only in times of urgent need. So basically, everyone rules. There's not a single ruler. And they all decide by consensus or majority rule. But the way we form the great circle only in times of urgent need, generally speaking, the smaller circles answer all the purposes. In fact, the family circle is in most cases quite sufficient. I touched First Barrel Brow's heart in a token of my gratitude for the many things which he had taught me, and then the back of his head to bid him good night. You may imagine his and my delight, dear friends, when the wise Bulgar raised himself upon his hind legs, and with his right paw also thanked the learned Barrel Brow, and then bade him good night by a light tap on the back of his head. Fortunate the traveler wrote, the learned Pseudopsy, attended by so wise and watchful a companion, true like a child. He goes on all fours, but by doing so he brings his heart and his brains on the same level, the only way for a man to wear them, if he would do his fellow creatures any good. The trouble with thy people in the upper world, little baron, is that they think too much. They clasp minds instead of clasping hands. They send messengers with gifts instead of sending themselves. They hire people to dance for them, to sing for them, to be merry for them. They will not be satisfied until they have hired people to help them be sorry, to whom they may say, "My friend is dead. I loved him. Weep 3 whole days for him." Okay, well, that's the end of chapter 19. And I usually do this like a bedtime story, 1 chapter a night. So I'm going to have to say goodnight, and I will be back to try to continue to finish this book. And I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you. Love you lots. Bye.